Good morning. How are you all? Beautiful summer morning. Holy smokes, it's gorgeous out. Well, welcome to worship. My name is Jeff Sinabaldo. If you don't know me, I'm a pastor, obviously, but I also teach at Notre Dame High School in West Haven. I teach freshman religion class and do campus ministry, and my anecdote is always I hang out with kids who are really interested in hockey, but I tell them about Jesus. That's what I do. So I'm happy to be with you. I'm on summer break still, so that's great. I hope you've had a lovely, lovely summer. It's good to be with you. Pastor Heidi obviously is on vacation, also coming back from the ELCA youth gathering down in New Orleans. So 16,000 or so, and a group from here were there, and nobody here went, right? You were there. What was one great thing from the youth gathering?
Meeting new people and understanding their cultures.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. You guys were there too? You were there. What was one thing you learned from the youth gathering? Or experienced? Nice. That's awesome. Well, cool. I'm glad you got to go. I didn't go, obviously, this time, but I was the synod coordinator back in 2018 for the one to Houston. Last time, it didn't happen in between now and then because of COVID. It was supposed to be in Minnesota. So the next one's going to be in Minnesota, where I always joke there's more Lutherans than people. But it will be good for the city and for the youth gathering to be there, having gotten kind of passed over, so to speak, because of everything we experienced the last few years. But my kids are grown up now, but I would say my son, who's 21, is still in the church because of the youth gathering. And it wasn't because of the speakers or the bands or the big, huge things, even though he loved all that and thought it was great. But it was the service day when we were working on this trail. And as far as you could see that direction and as far as you could see that direction, it was all orange shirts working on the same thing. And he said that was the moment he realized it wasn't just our little church, that he was part of something bigger and wanted to be a part of it. So it's a great ministry of our church. I'm glad it's back and glad you got to go and participate. And I'm sure you'll hear more stories in the weeks to come. So that's awesome. So today also we're going to say goodbye to a few friends. So Garrett and Kevin and Shay at the end of worship, we've got something for you. But in the meantime, we are starting what is normally called, at least by pastor types, kind of the Bread of Life series. So over the course of the next 5 weeks, you're going to hear, today we're going to hear the story of the feeding of the 5,000, a familiar one, and then Jesus kind of teaching on what that means and who he is and what that means for us over the course of these next weeks. So let's start. We begin with confession and forgiveness. And should we stand for that? Let's stand for that. Why not? As you are able, I invite you the Gospel according to John. Glory to you, Lord. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not be enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, and also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat and were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land towards which they were going. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. You want to come and help? You're 12. Perfect. Going on 25, right? Yeah, okay. All right, Camille. Here's the deal. You ready? All right. So do you like snacks? Me too. I also love snacks. Now, if I were to give you a snack, what would you think of this snack? Kind of lame, right? You would still eat it. All right. Now, if I gave you this snack, I'm going to give you this snack. Now, you look at the cast of 5,000 people sitting here. Does it look like if you shared that, it would go very far? Good for you. That's great. If you did share it anyway with everybody, how much would everybody get? Not a whole lot, right? Yeah, like a very itsy-bitsy crumb, right? Do you think there'd be leftovers? That is true. People are very messy. Good point. Now, if I was to give you this instead, now what do you think? Well, that's good. We didn't even rehearse this. Isn't that good? Yeah, okay, so now this looks like it'd be plenty, right? And if we gave everybody like a little baggie, like I brought little baggies, like if people took some, there'd probably be enough, right? You might even have leftovers, right? Plenty. Very good. All right, well, there you go. So this is kind of the story that we just heard. So when Jesus shows up, he takes what we have, which is sometimes not a lot, right? And it turns it into what? A whole bunch. Man, I didn't even need a sermon after that. That was pretty good. That's pretty great. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you these bags, okay? And I'm going to give you these 2 boxes. And then why don't we put them in the back? And then if people want to share snacks after worship is over, we can share it with everybody. How's that sound? Sounds great. All right. Thank you very much. And you can take yours too. You know what? Why don't you even fill your bag? That would be smart. That'd be great. All right. Let's give her a little encouragement. Thank you. Like I said, we didn't prep that, so that was good. That was good. All right, so we've seen this story. It feels kind of familiar, right? You've heard this one before, right? Me too. It's one of those stories that sometimes you lose track of because you may have heard it a bunch of times, or you got to church this morning and you looked and you said, "Oh, what are we doing today? Oh, the feeding of the 5,000." I know that one. But what I'd like to invite you to just think about is. What if you didn't hear it before? Or what if you didn't experience it before? How would you respond? It's kind of a shocking story, really, when you think about it. So I'm halfway through the summer. I don't have to go back for another few weeks. Still got like a month left, I think, before school starts. But the anxiety dreams have already started. So I have this dream that it's kind of this recurring dream where it's like the first day of school and I don't know what I'm doing at all, which will tell you a lot about how I kind of roll. So that I've had a few times. And then I had this new one. I'm in my 5th year of teaching. I had this new one that came 2 days ago where it was time for homeroom, which we have kind of like in the middle of the morning, and none of my kids showed up. And I was trying to hunt them down throughout the building. But again, it was the first day of school, so I had no idea who they were. So I was very happy when I woke up. But you get kind of this anxiety. before school starts. Actually, this week, though, I have a retreat starting tomorrow through Thursday with our seniors, with about a third of our seniors. We have this program, this peer counseling program. The way it works is these kids apply and have to interview and stuff, and we keep about 30 to 40 of them, and we say no to a bunch of them too, but we keep them, and then what they do is they're involved in this program where there's kind of two parts to it. The first part is kind of leadership development, so they work with a couple of my colleagues who do self-assessment stuff with them and do some leadership skill training with them. And then the other piece of it, since I teach the freshmen, is they come into my class about once a month, and they teach the class. So they'll put the presentations together, they put the kids in small groups, they run discussions. I love it. It's a nice way to kind of integrate the school and make those new kids a little less anxious and feel like they're a part of it. But now that I've been doing it a few years, it's really fun because the seniors that come into my class, I taught before when they were a little smaller. And so it's fun to see their growth over a number of years. So that's what I'm doing this week. And maybe after the retreat's over, the anxiety dues will hold off another week or so. I remember these stories, especially these ones that are really familiar. It's hard to enter them sometimes because you think to yourself, okay, Jesus feeds the multitude, we get that. But if you're sitting there experiencing it, or if you're hearing it for the first time, there's something really quite wonderful about this story because he takes things like the anxiety we bring and he turns it into celebration. And he takes our way of looking at the world that looks all so very scarce and we're not going to have enough because we just got 2 little goldfish in that baggie for everybody, right? And instead he turns it into this just abundance where there's so much left over, we're not even sure what to do. And then he takes the things that we look at in our lives that seem so uncertain and turns it into joy. And that's where I think this story really is rooted. A couple of years ago when I taught this story to my freshmen, now I teach at a church school, but a lot of them really aren't all that churchy. You know, they're there to play sports or some of these other programs. They're open to it. They're just not familiar. So I'm doing the feeding of the 5,000, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, self, what am I going to do to make this interesting? And at the same time, The Chosen was coming out. I don't know if you've watched The Chosen at all. Just wonderful depiction of Jesus and his disciples, and kind of told from the followers of Jesus' point of view. There's an episode that is this passage today. It is the feeding of the 5,000 followed by the walking on the water. And it's done in such a really wonderful way. It's just like this story as it's told. Jesus has been out with the people all day and he's been teaching them. And they're coming because they want to hear what Jesus has to say. They're coming because they want to see a miracle. They're coming because they want healing in their lives. Or maybe they've already experienced healing and want to see more or be a part of it. And it's getting late in the day, and Jesus is kind of looking at the crowd, and he turns to Philip and Andrew and the other disciples and say, well, they're hungry. What are you going to feed them? And they have that first day of school look on their face, like, uh-oh, I don't know what to do. How are we going to do this? If we took up a collection, we're never going to be able to feed all these people. If you worked for half a year, it wouldn't even feed these people even just a little bit. I mean, it is just 2 little goldfish crackers after all, right? It's not going to go very far. And just like we heard in the story, and the way that this is portrayed in The Chosen, everybody sits down, and you're always worried when you're watching a Jesus movie or a TV show, because when it comes to the miracles, you're afraid they're going to be kind of cheesy, right? But they depict it in this wonderful way. He takes this little boy's lunch, who offers it so gracefully, and then he does what he does in the story. He gives thanks, he breaks it, he gives it to his disciples and says, hand it out, and they have these baskets, but all of a sudden they do this because they're heavy, and they open it up and they're plumb full. And then what happens in the show is it turns into a party. There's like rock music going on, as it has in John, right? And then people are dancing and they're singing and they're talking to each other and they're moving across the space, and the disciples are excited, bewildered, but excited, and you see everything just transform in this moment from where you're anxious to where all of a sudden you're celebrating, and where you have this moment of scarcity to this moment of abundance, and you have this moment of just total uncertainty to pure joy. And if you can enter into that space, that's what happens when Jesus shows up. And I'm showing this to my kids. And this kid who sits in the back, and I'll be honest, sometimes dozes off a little bit, falls out of his chair, literally, onto the floor, stands up and says, "Wow, Jesus, he's the GOAT." And everybody in the classroom cheers. And I wasn't quite ready for that. And they were all excited about what happens when Jesus shows up. When he asks us, what are you going to do with all these people in need around you? And our first response is anxiety and scarcity and uncertainty. And he turns that into celebration and abundance and joy. And you know this. You've experienced this. I talked to Pastor Heidi this week. I know what's up with you guys. Right? I know how it goes down around here. I mean, I heard about the meals you bring to the New London Meal Center and how you do that every month. She told me you'd have a bunch of vegetables up here this morning to give out to people in the community garden. She told me about the youth gathering, which a couple of you were at, and how kids, teenagers from around the country and other parts of the world who participated in that raised $80,000 and said, you know, we're putting an end to hunger and it's starting with us. I mean, that is a powerful, powerful message. And so that's back to all the churches now for us to say, yeah, we got to pony up and follow their lead and what this means. And if you go to elca.org/hunger, you can participate in that. As I know, you find people at St. Luke's participate in World Hunger all the time. You know what this is about. When we come to Jesus with our anxiety and with our scarcity and with our uncertainty, when Jesus shows up, it's not 2 little gold crackers. It's these big, huge bins of goldfish, and there's not going to be enough place to store them afterwards. There's so many, right? That's how it goes in our lives. I love youth trips. I've gone on a number of them. I want to tell you about one in particular. It was about 8 years ago. I took a group of kids to Toronto. And the feature of that trip is the work we were doing was working in some soup kitchens. So if you've ever done some soup kitchen work, you know what that's like. You show up, you help make the meal, you serve it, and if they do a really good job, you get to eat with the people too and actually share community together. But I want to tell you about these 2 really extraordinary ministries that were happening in downtown Toronto. One was this downtown mission. They were on the ball. They were like, we don't want hunger in our city. We're doing something about it. They had, I think, a whole city block. They gave us this tour of this huge warehouse they had where the donations kept coming in. They showed us this shelter where people could come if they were in transition in some kind of way, whether they lost their jobs or their homes or there was some other circumstance going on in their lives. They could come and kind of find a spot to be for a while. And then they brought us to the kitchen. And this was like if you watch like Iron Chef or something like that. You know what a kitchen, like a big restaurant kitchen is like. And it was like that. I mean, they had people everywhere barking out the signals and people moving out every which way. But in a very, very kind Christian way, where they'd be like, sister, could you please cut the potatoes? And brother, could you please grab that mop? Hey, get it over here, da-da-da-da-da. And we're bouncing around. And then, so that took a few hours. And then it was time to serve the meal. And we all got in line and served the meal to the people and gave out 400 lunches in about an hour. You think, wow, this is impressive and how this has happened. And then when it was all over, the people who worked there every day gathered around us. They encircled our group. They thanked us. They prayed for us. They blessed us. They took us from a place of not knowing what we were getting ourselves into, right? So you've got all those things, anxiety and scarcity and uncertainty. And in that moment when Jesus shows up, what do you got? You've got the opposite, right? You've got joy. You've got abundance. You've got more than you could ever count on. It unexpectedly hits you. You fall out of your seat, just like LaShawn did in the back of my class. And then the rest of the week, we worked at this other place, which was kind of the opposite of that place. This place was in kind of a neighborhood. It was in a storefront. It was run by this little Capuchin monk named Henry, who is the absolute stereotypical friar. He was, maybe 5 feet tall and probably, 250. I mean, he was this nice little round, joyful little guy. And he had his brown habit on, and he had his little squiggly beard and his little square glasses, and he was wonderful. And he welcomed us as friends and partners into this space. He had taken his, over this little soup kitchen a number of years ago. He had an apartment where he lived above it, right upstairs. When he had taken it over, this little storefront, it was run down, and people would come in and have their meal, and it kind of had that leftover smell of old coffee and cigarettes, he kind of said. And then he said, we can do better than this. And he went out and raised a whole bunch of money, and he turned it into this beautiful cafe, like a little restaurant. And he said, there's a lot of need in our community. I'm not going to be able to feed them all, but the people that come here are going to be treated with respect and like a human being. And so he had 10 tables of 4 in this little place. And we ran it like a restaurant. He was the maitre d'. He welcomed people in. We were the waiters. We brought them their meal. They were encouraged to not only eat their meal, but to share in conversation and to linger. And after everybody was served and fed, and we brought them coffee to keep talking, we were invited to come eat with them and share the afternoon. And again, it was beautiful. And just like the other place, at the end of our time together, it was just him, but we kind of encircled together, and he thanked us and blessed us and prayed for us. And we had this moment where we all fell out of our chair, quite almost literally as LaShawn did, because it was this moment of moving from, anxiety and uncertainty to celebration and joy, where scarcity was turned into abundance. I invite you to experience this story again like that. See yourself in the crowd. You've been following Jesus. You've heard things about him. You want to get close to him so you can hear. You want to see him touch people and heal people. You're bringing those own aches in your own life. You hope you can get close enough where he might touch you also. And it's getting late. And the grumblies and the rumblies have started. And you're not sure what's going to happen next. You've been out there all day. You know it's a long walk home. He's in a little bit of a huddle in the back with his followers. You expect that he's going to tell you it's time to leave. But instead he tells you to get comfortable, to get to know the people around you. Introduce yourselves, in fact. And the disciples will be around shortly. And it's not just a little. It's not just a couple of goldfish in a little baggie. It's more than you've ever had. It's a Thanksgiving feast. You're stuffed. You're full. You want to hear more. You want to be around this Jesus. We live in a time of great uncertainty. We live in a time full of anxiety, don't we not? We live in a time where the future feels very scarce. And yet, what does Jesus do when Jesus shows up? He turns that scarcity into abundance, that anxiety into celebration, that doubt and uncertainty into great, great joy. So fall out of your seat if you must. But after you pick yourself up, come.